So imagine you're sitting on a really uncomfortable couch in a therapist's office,
Oh,
right?
setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah, and you're right in the middle of one of those completely exhausting cyclical arguments with your partner or a close friend.
The ones that just go in endless circles. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've all been there.
Exactly. You've been talking for an hour, just desperately trying to decode their side of the story, explaining your side. And then the therapist looks at both of you and says, well, the problem isn't that you don't understand each other.
Okay.
The problem is that you are desperately trying to.
Wow. I mean, that completely upends the golden rule of conflict resolution, doesn't
It
it?
really does. We're conditioned from like kindergarten to
Yeah.
believe that misunderstanding is always a bug in the system.
Right. It's always about, walking a mile in someone else's shoes.
Always. But for today's deep dive, we're looking at a framework called reflective humanism and this fascinating essay on something called planetary plurality. And our mission today is to ask a really uncomfortable question.
Which is whether demanding complete understanding might actually destroy the relationships we claim to care about.
Exactly. Whether it's between two nations or just two people, can a connection actually survive or even thrive while some parts remain deliberately unresolved and untranslatable?
It's a really challenging premise. I mean, it pushes back against everything we're taught.
Right, because my first reaction was, wait, if I don't try to understand my partner, or if a society doesn't try to understand a neighboring culture, isn't that just, willful ignorance? Aren't we just giving up?
It sounds like it, sure, but the sources actually reorient that whole idea. It's not about giving up on empathy. It's about recognizing what the demand for understanding actually does mechanically.
What do you mean by mechanically?
Well, we frame understanding as this act of profound connection, but it can just as easily be an act of absorption.
Oh, absorption. Okay, unpack that for me.
So if you make total comprehension a strict, non-negotiable condition for a relationship, you're eventually going to hit a wall. You'll hit something you just cannot comprehend.
Yeah. Right, there's always something.
And historically, when a dominant system or culture hits that wall, it doesn't just, let the mystery be.
No, definitely not.
It labels whatever it can't understand as backward or irrational or a threat, simply because it doesn't map onto its own internal logic.
Ah, so what we call understanding is often just forcing the other person to translate their reality into a language that makes sense to us.
Exactly. You're demanding they make themselves legible to your worldview.
That's a heavy realization. And to look at this on a global scale, the material introduces this really interesting concept called civilizational times.
Yes, civilizational times. It's a key part of the framework.
And the idea is that the planet doesn't just hold different cultures, but it holds multiple distinct timelines operating at the exact same moment.
Right, which sounds a bit like sci-fi at first.
It does, like time travel.
Yeah, but what it actually means is looking at the fundamental orientation of a society. Like you have regions and communities entirely oriented toward aggressive future growth, technological acceleration, expansion.
The fast-paced, modern city vibe.
Exactly. But living right alongside them on this very same planet, you have societies oriented toward maturity or maintenance and this deep continuity with the past.
Right, where the focus isn't necessarily building the next shiny thing.
Exactly. Or, you have systems structured around maximizing individual autonomy and others fundamentally structured around relational community bonds.
And the text makes it clear these aren't just, like, superficial cultural quirks, right?
No, not at all. They are deeply ingrained realities. They're shaped by totally different histories, available resources, past environmental crises. The whole works.
But the reflex of the modern globalized world is to pretend there's only one timeline. I mean, if you look at how international institutions operate, we try to put all of these vastly different civilizational times onto a single spreadsheet.
We absolutely do. And we use common metrics to do it.
Like GDP, right?
Yeah, gross domestic product, productivity indexes, standardized education levels, even those global happiness metrics we see in the news.
Right. And, to be intellectually fair here, the authors do acknowledge that these shared metrics aren't inherently evil.
No, they're highly functional. I mean, you need them for global trade or climate agreements or large-scale policy design.
And I'm guessing those metrics come with a pretty massive blind spot. Because if you measure a society that prioritizes, say, generational stability, but you use a metric designed to track quarterly economic growth.
That society is going to look like a massive failure.
Right. Because they're not even playing the same game.
And that is the core issue the text brings up. These metrics act as instruments of compression. There's a very specific mechanical pipeline at work here.
Walk me through that pipeline.
So first, you take these radically different civilizational times. Then you apply a universal metric, like GDP.
Okay.
Once you do that, it allows you to compare them.
Mm.
And comparison inevitably leads to ranking them on a list.
Number 1 through 100 and whatever.
Exactly. And that ranking creates a single linear story of human development.
Which implies everyone is on the same track. It's basically like data compression in audio files.
Well, that's an interesting analogy. How so?
So if you have this massive, rich, high-resolution audio file, like a FLAC file, but you need it to play on some basic web browser, you have to convert it to an MP3.
Right, to make it smaller.
Exactly. And the algorithm literally deletes the deep, complex frequencies to save space and make it compatible. The song still plays, sure, but the actual depth of the music is permanently gone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And in this global pipeline you're talking about, the cultural values that don't fit the economic or political algorithm are just treated as deleted data.
That is an incredibly precise way to visualize it. What cannot be measured by the dominant metric is treated as if it just doesn't exist. Or worse, it's treated as a defect that needs to be fixed.
Because the underlying assumption is that everyone is running the exact same race.
Right, and the people at the bottom of the ranking just, they need some help catching up to the modern finish line.
But the material argues this is a fundamentally flawed way of looking at the world.
Deeply flawed. Because these aren't different stages of development on one timeline. They are entirely different realities that need to be viewed side by side.
So, okay, if we accept that we aren't all running the same race, how do we actually interact? Because if we aren't heading toward the same finish line, the whole idea of global cooperation seems, well, incredibly fragile.
It does. And the material outlines two divergent models for how we handle this. The one we currently default to is called coexistence through assimilation.
Coexistence through assimilation. Okay.
Yeah. This is where you encounter a difference and you immediately try to translate it into your common language and unify all the standards of value.
Which creates that MP3 compression we talked about. You get some surface stability, but you lose the depth.
Exactly. It allows large institutions to synchronize. But the hidden danger, the real structural flaw here, is that untranslatable ways of life are forced to the margins.
They're essentially pushed out of public existence.
Yeah. And beneath that polished surface stability, those marginalized differences don't just disappear. They quietly build up heat and systemic friction.
Which leads us to the alternative they propose, which is planetary plurality. And what really caught my attention here is that this model actively refuses to seek complete agreement.
Right. It doesn't want the MP3.
Instead, it focuses on something called the tuning of boundaries.
Boundary tuning. It's this ongoing dynamic process of asking a much harder set of questions. Instead of asking, how do we make them like us?
You ask what can be shared.
Yes. What can be shared, what fundamentally cannot be shared, and where do we actually need to establish and respect distance?
Let's ground this in a real example because this concept of untranslatability is a bit tricky.
It is, yeah.
Take a foundational word like freedom. If you run that word through a translation app, you're going to get a direct equivalent in almost any language.
Sure. It translates easily on a surface level.
But the worldview underneath that word might be entirely incompatible. In one civilizational time, freedom means independence.
Right, like individual autonomy.
Yeah. It means the ability to detach yourself from your family or your community, make your own money, be self-reliant.
But if you take that exact same translated word into a different civilizational time, the foundational premise flips completely.
How so?
Well, freedom there might mean having such a secure, guaranteed, structural role within a community that you are completely protected from ever being isolated.
Oh, wow. So in culture A, freedom is being alone, but in culture B, freedom is the absolute guarantee that you will never be alone.
Exactly. So if you try to force assimilation there, you aren't just disagreeing on a dictionary definition.
You're demanding that one culture abandon its entire psychological safety net.
Which is huge. And that is exactly why boundary tuning is so crucial. But I have to say, this usually triggers a very specific and valid concern.
The relativism concern?
Yes, extreme relativism. Because if we embrace plurality and just say, well, we can't translate this, let's just leave it unresolved.
It sounds dangerously close to saying, well, that's just their culture, let them do whatever they want.
Right. It raises the question, how do we handle systemic violence or human rights abuses if our default stance is to just back off and respect the mystery?
That was my biggest sticking point. But it's vital to separate plurality from uncritically affirming all behavior.
Definitely. The text explicitly states that planetary plurality is not moral relativism,
Right. It requires what they call minimum conditions for sustained contact.
meaning there is a baseline. You cannot have sustained contact or even a shared planet if one system is actively seeking the destruction or subjugation of another.
So the rigorous work of plurality isn't just throwing your hands up and saying anything goes.
No, not at all. It is the deeply uncomfortable work of untangling the bare minimum required for nonviolence from the arrogant demand that everyone think exactly alike,
It's identifying that crucial boundary between stopping harm and forcing assimilation.
which is a very difficult line to walk.
It is, and what I find absolutely fascinating is how seamlessly this massive geopolitical philosophy maps onto our daily lives. The authors argue that these exact same dynamics govern interpersonal relationships.
They do. I mean, we tend to think of global diplomacy and personal intimacy as entirely different realms, right?
Right, like they have nothing to do with each other.
But the cognitive mechanics are identical. The sustainability of a personal relationship isn't determined by maximizing the sheer volume of understanding you can extract from the other person.
Which takes us right back to that therapist couch from the beginning of our deep dive. If I'm in an argument and I demand to know exactly why my friend or my partner did something, I think I'm doing the healthy communicative thing.
Of course, that's what we're taught.
But this framework suggests I might be doing something much darker. I might be trying to fixate them.
Cognitive boxing is a good way to think about it. The moment you feel you have completely 100% understood someone, you've reduced a complex, evolving human being to a single, static explanation.
I basically put them in a box.
Exactly. You define their parameters. And structurally, once you've done that, you destroy their capacity to surprise you. You've mapped them out entirely.
It's like saying, oh, they just said that because they have an anxious attachment style. Boom. Solved.
Right. Mystery over.
But in doing that, I've stopped engaging with them as a living, breathing person. I've started interacting with the psychological profile I created for them.
And the friction you feel when someone defies that profile, when they act in a way you can't comprehend, is what the text actually calls transparent pain.
Transparent pain. That is such a specific, visceral phrase. What is the actual mechanism happening in the brain there?
Well, it's basically the cognitive dissonance of a complex reality shattering your brain's predictive model. Your brain wants a simple, linear cause and effect, right?
Yeah, the brain loves a shortcut.
Exactly. So when someone operates from a different, equally valid internal logic that you just cannot map, it physically frustrates the brain. It actually hurts a little.
It's like when you're traveling abroad and you try to apply your home country's logic to a local custom. Oh, yes.
And you just end up intensely frustrated because the pieces don't fit together the way you expect them to.
Yes. But the real paradigm shift here is realizing that transparent pain isn't a sign that the relationship is failing.
It's not.
No, it's actually proof of vitality. It is the friction that proves the other person is still real, still autonomous, and not just a projection of your own mind.
Wow. So the ununderstood parts are actually what keep the space between you alive.
Exactly.
But practically speaking, if we accept that we will never, and maybe should never, fully understand the people closest to us, how do we actually stay close?
Well, the proposed solution in the text is something called the ethics of distance.
The ethics of distance.
Yeah, and it's defined as the ethical practice of touching without touching too much.
Touching without touching too much. That sounds like a paradox.
It does, but it's about establishing a fluid boundary. It creates a relational space where you can approach, connect, separate, hold, and then reconnect.
So distance isn't a bad thing. No. In this model, distance is not a failure of intimacy. Distance is the structural buffer that allows both sides to breathe. It keeps you from being consumed by the other person's need to analyze and comprehend you.
That is a profound way to look at relationships. But, if humans with all our emotional intelligence and nuance struggled this profoundly with the ethics of distance, it brings up a massive technological concern for me.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Because we are currently outsourcing a huge amount of our translation and communication to artificial intelligence, right?
We are. It's everywhere.
So if AI is designed to be the ultimate universal translator, isn't it basically the ultimate assimilation engine?
That is the exact institutional reality we're colliding with right now. I mean, look at the architecture of large language models, LLMs.
Okay, how do they fit into this?
They function by predicting the most statistically probable next word or token based on a massive training corpus. And because they train on the majority of data, they naturally pull meaning toward the most common vocabulary.
Right. They aim for the center.
Yes, they pull toward the most widely documented cause and effect relationships.
So, going back to our audio analogy from earlier, LLMs are basically highly aggressive MP3 compressors.
Exactly.
If you feed an LLM a deeply nuanced, culturally specific concept, something that relies on untranslatable bodily sensations or like generational memory, the AI doesn't know what to do with that fiction.
No, it doesn't like friction.
So it flattens the vectors, it synthesizes it into a generalized, usually Western-leaning logic, just to output a coherent sentence.
It smooths out the transparent pain automatically. It takes that culture where freedom means community security, runs it through the neural network, and spits it out sounding like Western individualism.
So it literally erases the civilizational time difference just by functioning exactly as it was designed to.
Yes, but the authors of our sources don't think this technological flattening is inevitable.
They don't.
No, they propose a completely different way to design AI. They argue that AI should not be built as an integration machine that forces all human knowledge into a single, unified intellect.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
They use a Japanese term, kanchotaiki, which roughly translates to an interference atmosphere.
An interference atmosphere. How does an AI act as an atmosphere rather than like an all-knowing oracle? What does that look like mechanically?
So instead of forcing a single homogenized output, the AI architecture would need to present multiple interpretations side by side.
Like showing its work, almost.
Yeah, but going further, it would be explicitly programmed to highlight what cannot be translated. It would actively flag the boundaries.
Oh, that's interesting.
It would act as a neutral buffer where different intelligences can interact,
Yeah.
observe the interference patterns between their different logics, but not be forced to merge into one reality.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here.
Please do.
Is that in any way realistic? Because the entire incentive structure of the tech industry is built on frictionless user experiences. People want definitive answers. Are tech companies really going to spend billions of dollars to build an AI that says, hey, here are 3 conflicting worldview interpretations, and by the way, I refuse to resolve this tension for you. You just have to sit with the mystery.
You're pointing out a massive tension between philosophical idealism and market incentives. And honestly, the authors are well aware of that.
So how do they justify it?
Their counterargument focuses on the catastrophic long-term stakes if we don't build it this way.
What happens if we don't?
If AI becomes the core infrastructure for global institutions, like legal systems, healthcare, diplomacy, and it operates as an assimilation engine, we risk erasing untranslatable ways of life. And not through war, but just through algorithmic convenience.
Because it's just easier for the computer to average everything out.
Exactly. For AI to actually support planetary coexistence, it has to be treated as an environment for observing difference, not a tool for eliminating it.
It has to preserve the friction as a feature, not a bug.
Beautifully said, yes.
This has been a deeply dense, challenging dive today, so let's try to pull all of this together. What we are really unpacking today is a fundamental redefinition of maturity, isn't it?
It really is. Planetary maturity is not about everyone holding hands and thinking the exact same way.
It's the realization that true stability is never a rigid, unified block.
Right. The material defines maturity as the ability to maintain reconnectable paths across different civilizational times.
Reconnectable paths.
Yes. It's ensuring that multiple worlds can exist on the exact same planet, sharing the same physical space, without forcing the minority to assimilate, just to be allowed to exist.
And bringing that macro concept right down to the micro level of your daily life, whether you are dealing with a difficult coworker, a complex friendship, or just trying to parse through international news.
Yeah, the everyday applications are huge.
The core insight is that true connection does not require total assimilation. You do not have to map every inch of someone's psyche to respect their right to be exactly who they are.
But it requires a high tolerance for ambiguity, which is hard. We have to accept that our personal logic isn't the universal baseline.
Right.
And that the frustration we feel when we can't completely decode someone else, that transparent pain, is actually a testament to their humanity.
I want to leave you with a final thought today, drawing on that idea of the ethics of distance. We are heavily conditioned to believe that dialogue is the ultimate savior of any relationship.
We really are. When things get tough, the instinct is always, we need to talk.
Right. We need to talk, we need to explain this, we need to hash it out. But if we apply this framework, Could it be that sometimes intentional silence isn't a failure to communicate?
Oh, that's a powerful shift.
Could intentional silence actually be the deepest form of respect?
A conscious decision to let the other person just exist without demanding they render themselves legible for your comfort.
Exactly. A way to say, I don't completely understand your internal world, but I refuse to overwrite your reality with my own.
That is profound.
So here's your challenge for the week. The next time you feel that urgent, burning need to relentlessly explain yourself, or worse, demand a perfect, logical explanation from someone else, try stopping.
Let's pause.
Try sitting in the uncomfortable silence of not knowing. The utopia isn't a world where we all understand each other perfectly and never have conflict.
No, that's a flattened MP3 world.
Exactly. The real utopia might just be a world where we can look at the murky, untranslatable depths of our differences and decide that we don't need to fix them in order to value them.
See what survives in that space.
See what survives in that space. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.